Okay, let's unpack this. Today we have a massive stack of sources sitting right here in front of me, and we are doing a deep dive into Celtic mythology.
Yes, and it is a massive topic.
It really is. And I want to start by setting a scene, because usually when we think about ancient pantheons, we default to the classics, right?
Right, the ones we all learned about in school.
Exactly. We picture the Greek gods up on Mount Olympus, just entirely removed from human life
Yeah.
by staggering altitude and, all that pristine marble.
Very distant, very detached.
Yeah, or we think of the Norse gods.
Yeah.
And sure, they might bleed and fight, but they're still safely tucked away in Asgard.
Right, separated from us by a literal cosmic rainbow bridge.
Exactly. You have to travel across dimensions to get to them. But today's deep dive is taking us in a completely different direction. We're looking at translations of medieval Irish manuscripts, Welsh prose tales like the Mabinogion, and a ton of modern analysis.
It's a very rich textual tradition.
It is. And the core mission today is to explore the pagan deities of the Celtic world. We want to extract the profound wisdom these grounded, fiercely present myths hold about power, about nature, and just the human condition in general.
Which is fascinating because, as you said, they aren't distant.
No, they don't live on some distant mountain. They live right here, in the hills, the rivers, like the specific fields you can see from your window right now.
What's fascinating here is that proximity is exactly the right place to start, because the distance between the human world and the divine world in Celtic thought isn't measured in miles.
Right.
It isn't measured in altitude or cosmic geography. It is measured entirely by attention.
Wait, attention, like just noticing things.
Precisely. If you know how to look and where to look, the threshold to the other world is literally right at your feet.
That is wild.
It's the mist rising off a particular stream at dawn, or maybe a strange mound of earth at the edge of a forest. The gods are your neighbors.
Which means they aren't these untouchable perfections. They're gritty, they bleed, they fail, they hold intense grudges.
Oh, very intense grudges.
And they make absolute catastrophic mistakes that they have to live with, which makes them such a compelling mirror to our own messy realities. But before we get into the actual stories, we really need to talk about where these stories even come from.
Yes, the source material context is crucial.
Because the way we receive them is a story in itself. I was reading this and I couldn't quite wrap my head around it.
It's a critical lens through which we have to view all of this material. So these incredible tales of shape-shifting divine cauldrons, severed heads that keep giving advice for 80 years.
Which is just an amazing image, by the way.
Right. But they weren't written down by the pagan Celts themselves. The Celts prized oral tradition.
Right, they memorized everything.
Exactly. So these stories were entirely written down by Christian monks centuries after the pagan era had effectively ended.
Wait, so the people preserving the pagan myths were the exact same people whose religion replaced them?
That's exactly it.
That feels incredibly precarious. Why wouldn't they just burn the stories? I mean, isn't that what usually happens?
You would think so, but they were acting in a way as neutral archivists of their own cultural heritage.
Oh, interesting.
You can almost feel these monks in the manuscripts carefully handling this explosive, bizarre pagan material. They clearly didn't fully understand all the cosmological implications of what they were recording.
Because they had a totally different worldview.
Right. But they respected the cultural weight of it, so they applied a sort of historical fiction framework to it.
How do you mean?
They turned these ancient gods into ancient human heroes who just happened to have extraordinary magical abilities.
Oh, wow. So they gave it a Christian gloss over these profound ancient pagan truths.
Exactly. They sanitized it just enough to justify writing it down without being heretical.
Which honestly makes the survival of these stories even more miraculous.
Yeah.
We're essentially reading the notes of people who are trying to document a dying star.
That's a beautiful way to put it.
So let's dive into the actual world they documented. If these gods live in our world, in the dirt and the rivers, and they bleed exactly like us, what happens when their leaders are broken?
Ah, the logic of kingship. This is foundational.
Right. The sources point to this absolute rule about power. The story of Nuada and Bress really unpacks this. Let's look at Nuada first.
He's a great king of the gods.
Yes, the Tuatha De Danann. But he loses his arm in a massive battle. And the moment the battle is over, despite winning, he is immediately forced to step down from the throne.
And the logic operating behind his abdication is one of the most crucial concepts in Celtic mythology.
Because it seems so unfair, right?
He won.
It does seem unfair to modern eyes. But a king must be physically whole, not out of some superficial vanity or a desire for an aesthetically pleasing leader,
And why?
because the king's body is in a literal, sympathetic covenant with the land itself.
Okay, I want to make sure I'm fully grasping this. When you say sympathetic covenant, you mean a direct physical tether between the state of the king and the state of reality around him. Precisely. If the king is broken, the kingdom itself breaks.
Wait, literally?
Literally, the crops will fail, the weather will turn chaotic, the cattle will stop producing milk. The king is the conduit through which prosperity flows into the world.
Oh, wow.
So to keep a wounded, imperfect king on the throne is to accept that wound as a permanent condition of reality for everyone in the kingdom. Nuada cannot rule because his missing arm means the land is now missing its vitality.
So Nuada does the honorable thing.
Yeah.
He steps aside to protect the land, and the gods give the throne to this other figure, Bress.
And Bress is a spectacular disaster.
A complete disaster. The texts describe him as physically beautiful, perfectly whole, but he is completely ungenerous.
Yes.
Under his rule, the greatest heroes and champions of the gods are reduced to hauling firewood and digging ditches. He doesn't host feasts, he doesn't give gifts. But as I was reading the analyses, it became clear that his lack of generosity isn't just him being a bad host.
No, not at all. It is a fundamental theological disqualification. In this ancient society, a king who doesn't feast his warriors, who doesn't pour the mead and distribute the wealth, breaks the core contract of sovereignty.
Because generosity isn't a personality trait here.
Exactly. It is the mechanical mechanism that keeps the society alive. Wealth was meant to circulate, to bind people together in obligation and loyalty.
It's the ultimate social contract. A leader who hoards power or resources literally breaks the kingdom just as surely as a physical wound would. Bress is physically whole, but morally and structurally broken.
Which is why the gods realize they need Nuada back on the throne?
Right. And this introduces us to Sect, the divine physician. And what shocked me here is that his solution to Nuada's missing arm isn't to wave a magic wand and grow it back.
No, it's highly technical.
It's pure mechanical engineering. He builds Nuada a fully functional, articulated silver arm. Every joint works.
He becomes known as Nuada of the Silver Hand.
Yeah.
It's an incredible moment in the mythos because it operates as a profound statement on human ingenuity. What the body loses, the mind can replace with sufficient skill and craft.
It's like ancient prosthetics.
Very much so. But the story doesn't end with this triumph of engineering. This is where it turns into a devastating tragedy.
Yeah, this part is so dark.
Dian Cecht has a son named Miach. Miach inherits his father's healing gifts, but he completely and utterly surpasses them.
Right. Miach looks at this mechanical silver arm, as perfect as it is, and essentially says, I can do better than metal.
Yes.
Over 3 days and nights, Miach actually regrows flesh, bone, tendon, and nerve over Nuada's shoulder. He works with his sister, Ermd, and they make the god perfectly biologically whole again.
And we have to pause and consider how the father reacts to his son achieving this unprecedented medical miracle.
You'd think he'd be proud.
He murders him.
It's just awful.
Out of pure, petty, blinding professional jealousy, Dian Cecht takes a sword and strikes his own son. And he strikes him 4 times.
This part of the text was just incredibly visceral to read. Miach is such a profound healer that when his father strikes the first blow to his head, Miach instantly heals it.
He heals it while standing there.
Right. The father strikes again, cutting deeper, and Miach heals that. He heals the first 3 blows. But the 4th blow goes straight down through the brain, splitting the skull, and Miach finally dies.
And the myths state this without any apology or elaborate justification.
No padding at all?
None. The greatest established healer in the divine world murdered an even greater healer simply because his ego couldn't withstand being surpassed.
It is the ultimate story of corporate sabotage, really. A stagnant legacy, violently suppressing progress. The established order, the father, would rather destroy the cure for all human ailments than let go of his own pride and accept the brilliance of the next generation.
It's a tragic ego of the established order.
And the fallout of this murder is just heartbreaking. Miach's sister, Ermd, goes to his grave and just weeps over the dirt.
Yes.
And from her tears, 365 distinct healing herbs grow out of the soil, one for every joint and sinew in his body. She lays out her cloak and begins to carefully, systematically catalog every single cure for every human ailment.
She is essentially building the ultimate medical text, the cure for everything.
Until Dian Cecht arrives.
Right. He sees what she's doing, and he violently shakes her cloak, scattering all 365 herbs to the wind, mixing them up so completely that no one could ever fully understand their properties again.
I mean, that is just...
If we step back and look at the structural purpose of this myth, this is the Celtic origin story for why human beings cannot cure every disease.
It's not because the knowledge doesn't exist.
Exactly. The cures are out there in the earth. It's because a jealous god scattered the evidence to protect his own pride. We are essentially living in the permanent aftermath of that divine ego.
That is a staggering way to view human suffering, not as a punishment for our sins, but as collateral damage from a dispute among the gods.
It's a very pragmatic theology.
So, from a king who failed through ego, let's look at the gods who embody sheer, unapologetic capability. We need to talk about the messy totality of power.
Ah, the Dagda and Lugh.
Yes, because reading about the Dagda was a trip. He is known as the good god, the wise patriarch of the pantheon, but the physical descriptions of him in the texts are hilariously contradictory.
They really are.
He's described as immensely fat, he wears a tunic that is way too short and barely covers his backside, and he drags this massive club on wheels that is so incredibly heavy it takes 8 normal men just to lift it.
A very bizarre image for a chief god.
Right. And one end of this club kills the living, while the other end revives the dead.
It is very easy for modern readers to look at the Dagda and think he's a comedic relief character, a buffoon.
Yeah, totally.
But it is vital to understand what his title means. Good, in the context of the Dagda, does not mean morally pure or saintly.
What does it mean then?
It's closer to the old English sense of being good at something. A good sword is a sword that is exceptionally good at cutting. The Dagda is complete. He is effective.
Oh, I see.
He is the embodiment of superabundance. He doesn't have to choose between being a figure of terrifying gravity and a figure of earthy comedy. He encompasses all of it.
The story that perfects that image is the porridge incident. I could not believe this when I read it.
It's a classic.
Before a massive battle, his enemies capture him under the guise of a truce, and they decide to humiliate him. They dig a pit in the ground big enough to bury a giant in, and they fill it with porridge.
And it's not a normal porridge.
No, it's not just oats. They throw in whole goats, sheep, and pigs, boil it all together, and then hand him a ladle that you could literally sleep inside. And they tell him, eat all of this or we'll kill you.
And what does he do?
He just does it.
Yeah.
He eats the entire pit of sludge. But the analysis points out he doesn't do it out of fear, right?
Exactly. What's fascinating here is that he does it because refusing a feast, even a mocking, grotesque feast meant to humiliate him, would betray his fundamental nature of total abundance and hospitality.
You can't turn down food.
He is the god of consuming and providing. He absorbs the insult by completely overpowering it through his sheer capacity.
And then, with his belly literally dragging on the ground, he just waddles away, leaving them completely baffled.
He wins by being perfectly himself.
But it's not all physical comedy. Let's look at his harp. This blew me away. He has a magical harp that plays the 3 sacred strains of music. Sorrow, joy, and sleep.
Yes, Euphony.
Right. When his enemies manage to steal it, he tracks them down to their feasting hall. He doesn't attack them with his club. He stands at the door and calls the harp across the room. It flies into his hands, killing 9 men on its trajectory, and then he simply plays it.
And notice what the music does.
Yeah.
The enemies weep uncontrollably, then they laugh hysterically, and then they fall into an unbreakable slumber, and the Dagda simply walks out with his heart.
In this context, music is not art. It is not entertainment. It's a biological weapon.
Precisely. He forces emotion directly into the physical bodies of his enemies, completely bypassing their will. That is the power of the Dagda.
It's terrifying when you think about it. But the Dagda's brute force and overwhelming totality isn't the only way power manifests. That brings us to Luke, who acts as almost the perfect counterbalance.
Luth the Ildana.
Luke is the god of all skills. There's this amazing cinematic moment where he arrives at the gates of Tara, the high seat of the gods. The gatekeeper asks him what his skill is, because no one enters without a craft.
You have to be useful.
Exactly. Luke says he's a builder. The gatekeeper says we already have one. Luke says he's a smith. We have one. A poet, a warrior, a harper, a physician. The gatekeeper keeps turning him down, saying they have masters for all of those.
And then Luke asks the winning question.
Finally, Luke asks, but do you have one single man who is a master of all of those things at once?
And that is how he gains entry, taking the title Samildanach, the possessor of all arts.
It's like he's the ultimate smartphone in a world of single-use tools.
That's a great analogy. If the Dagda is raw, earth-shaking power, Luth represents the light of radiant, precise intelligence. Think of him like a cosmic polymath, a chess grandmaster who can also hand-forge the pieces, write an epic poem about the game, and then heal anyone injured during the match.
He is absolute piercing competence. And his parentage adds such a wild layer to this. His grandfather is this terrifying tyrant named Balor of the Fomorians.
Balor of the Evil Eye.
And Balor has a literal weapon of mass destruction housed in his own skull. He has an eye that requires 4 men to lift the eyelid with hooks, and when it opens, the gaze instantly destroys everything in front of it. It burns entire armies to ash.
It is the ultimate expression of destructive, scorching power. But there is a prophecy.
There's always a prophecy.
Always. Balor is told that he will eventually be killed by his own grandson. So, in classic mythological fashion, Balor tries to outrun fate. He locks his only daughter away in a crystal tower to ensure she never has a child.
Which, of course, just guarantees the prophecy will come true.
Yeah.
Someone sneaks in, she gets pregnant, and Lu is born.
Naturally.
Balor tries to have the infant drowned, but Lu survives, is raised in secret, and eventually leads the gods into battle against his grandfather.
The Second Battle of Moytura.
Right. And at the climax of this great battle, Balor's eyelid is being hoisted open to destroy the army. Luke doesn't use a massive club or a magical sword. He takes a simple sling, loads it with a stone, and drives the stone with such terrifying kinetic precision that it hits Balor's eye just as it opens, driving the eye backward through his skull.
So that the destructive gaze of the eye falls entirely upon Balor's own army behind him, wiping them out.
It's brilliant.
The harder Balor tried to outrun his fate, the more perfectly he constructed the trap for himself. Luke's precision turned the enemy's greatest weapon against them.
But the thing that really stuck with me about Luke is what happens after the victory. The great Celtic harvest festival, Lughnasadh, is named after him.
Yes, in August.
But reading the sources, I realized Luke didn't establish this massive cultural festival to honor his own battle prowess or his victory over Balor. He established it to mourn his foster mother, Teal'c.
That's a vital detail.
She literally worked herself to death, clearing the dense forests and plains of Ireland so that humanity could practice agriculture and survive.
It is a sobering reminder embedded in the myth. In the Celtic worldview, victories do not come for free.
Someone always pays.
Always. The land is not given freely, it is won through sacrifice. Teal'c's death clearing the plains is the price paid for the harvest. Lu's brilliance is necessary to protect the world, but it is Teal'c's labor that feeds it.
Which feels like the perfect bridge to understanding how the Celts viewed the actual grinding machinery of war.
The anatomy of war and dread.
Exactly. Because reading these sources, it became incredibly clear that war wasn't just about logistics, troop movements, and who had the sharper bronze swords. It was about profound, visceral, psychological terror.
It was psychological warfare at its core.
Let's talk about the Morrigan.
The Morrigan. Her name translates roughly to the Phantom Queen, or the Great Queen. She is arguably one of the most complex figures in the entire pantheon.
She really is. You cannot easily categorize her.
No, you can't. She holds sovereignty, prophecy, battle magic, and sexuality all operating simultaneously. To control one aspect is to be inextricably linked to all of them.
She is so intimidating that even the Dagda, the guy who eats pits of porridge and kills with a magical harp, has to approach her with intense caution.
He treaded very lightly.
Before the great battle against the Fomorians, he finds her washing at a river ford. He essentially acts as a petitioner, asking for her help. She agrees, and she promises to go into the enemy camp and extract the kidneys of the enemy's valor.
It is a deeply unsettling image, isn't it?
It's terrifying. It's surgical. She isn't promising to clash swords with their frontline fighters. She is promising to reach into the psychological anatomy of the enemy leadership and extract their courage before the battle even begins.
Surgery, not just swordplay.
But what happens when a hero doesn't respect her power?
Here's where it gets really interesting.
The story of Cuchulain's mistake is one of the most famous in Irish myth. Cuchulainn is the greatest warrior of his age, almost a demigod. Before a massive conflict, the Morrigan comes to him in the form of a beautiful young woman. She offers him her love, her wealth, and her absolute protection in the coming war. And Cuchulainn just brushes her off. He essentially says, "I'm here to fight. I don't have time to deal with women right now."
It is a catastrophic, fatal error in judgment. He thinks he is rejecting a distraction?
But he's not.
No. In reality, he is rejecting the sovereignty goddess of the land who came to him in good faith. He insulted the very concept of the earth he is standing on.
So she promises to destroy him. During his most vulnerable moments of single combat, fighting for his life in a river ford, she attacks him. First, she turns into an eel and wraps around his legs to trip him into the water.
And he's already fighting someone else at the time.
Right. Then she becomes a wolf, stampeding a herd of cattle directly at him. Then she becomes a red heifer leading the stampede.
Cuchulainn is skilled enough that he manages to physically survive the attacks, and he actually wounds her in each of her animal forms. He breaks her ribs, blinds her in one eye, and shatters her leg.
But you cannot leave a wound upon a deity unreconciled.
Exactly. The universe demands balance.
So later on, he is staggering away, dying of thirst, and he finds an old, half-blind woman milking a cow. He begs her for 3 drinks of milk, she gives them to him, and with every drink he offers her a profound blessing of health.
And as he blesses her, the old woman transforms back into the Morgan, fully healed.
He unwittingly healed the wounds he gave her.
He did. But the tragedy of the story is that while the physical wounds are healed, the cosmic slight remains.
The insult was still there.
Exactly. Teaslean's rejection before the war sealed his ultimate fate. At the end of his life, in his final battle, he is mortally wounded. He famously ties himself to a standing stone with his own entrails so that he can die on his feet, facing his enemies.
Which is such a metal image.
Very. And as he finally dies, a crow lands on his shoulder. It is the Morgan.
And the sources point out that she isn't the one who struck the killing blow. She didn't murder him. The crow perching on his shoulder is just a silent, terrifying recognition of the fate he chose the moment he closed the door on her alliance.
A recognition of his chosen doom.
It's chilling. But she isn't even the only face of battle terror. The texts describe this trio of goddesses that really capture the absolute paralyzing dread of combat. Badhabi, Macha, and Nemain.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, these 3 figures represent the lived, grueling reality of ancient warfare. They aren't abstraction.
They're the real experience of war. Let's look at Badhabi.
Badbi is the witness. She is often seen as a washer at the ford, scrubbing the bloody armor of those who are destined to die that day. She speaks the prophecy of the slaughter before it begins.
And after the battle?
After the battle, she flies over the field and screams the verdict. That scream is widely considered the mythological origin of the Irish keening tradition. The formal, public, wailing mourning of the dead.
Then there's Macha, who embodies the devastating physical cost of conflict. Her story is brutal. She is forced to live in the mortal world, and she is pregnant. Her mortal husband goes to a royal fair and foolishly boasts to the king that his pregnant wife could outrun the king's prize horses.
A boast that the king immediately demands be proven.
Despite her begging to wait until after she gives birth, the king forces her to race the chariots.
It's horrific.
It really is. She runs the race. She actually wins. But the exertion forces her into labor right there at the finish line. She gives birth to twins in agony. And as she lies there, she curses the men of Ulster.
But the curse isn't just a generic, "I hope you die."
No, it is incredibly specific.
It is a perfect, terrifying mirroring of the pain they forced upon her. She declares that in their hour of greatest need, when they are facing annihilation, the fighting men of Ulster will be struck down and suffer the exact debilitating physical pains of childbirth.
Oh, wow.
For 5 days and 4 nights, they will be entirely incapacitated.
And finally, there is Nemain. She is pure, distilled panic. The sources say that her single, shrieking cry could kill 100 armed warriors dead of absolute fright before a battle even properly starts.
Pure terror.
When I try to synthesize this trio, Bad, Macha, Nemain, I can't help but see an ancient, deeply visceral understanding of trauma and psychological warfare. They understood that war isn't just won by swinging a sword harder than the other guy.
No, not at all.
It is won by breaking the enemy's mind. It's won in that split second of total dissociation when a soldier forgets why they are holding a spear and just succumbs to panic. It feels so modern. It's an ancient understanding of PTSD.
That is an excellent way to frame it. The sword compels the body to yield, but the mind is compelled by much deeper, older terrors.
And speaking of compelling the mind, we have to look at how the Celts viewed craft and wisdom. In this tradition, wisdom was not viewed as a serene, dusty library of facts.
Not from it.
Wisdom was an active fire. It could keep you warm in the dark, or it could burn your house down.
The weight of words in Celtic society was immense. The power of the poet really illustrates that. A poet wasn't just an entertainer singing songs for coins.
No, they had real political power.
Exactly. If a king disrespected a master poet, the poet could compose a satire so linguistically lethal, so perfectly crafted, that it would literally raise red, weeping blisters on the king's face. Words had tangible, physical weight.
Just look at the god Ogma, or as he was known in Gaul, Ogmios.
Ogmios is a fascinating case study in how eloquence was viewed. We have accounts from Greek writers who traveled in Gaul and they saw a local statue of this god. To the Greeks, it looked absurd.
Because it wasn't a young, buff guy.
Right. It was an old, sun-scorched, balding man leading a massive crowd of happy followers, but they weren't following him freely.
Right. The Greeks noticed that there were thin, incredibly delicate golden chains attached from the tongue of the old man directly to the ears of the followers.
And the Greeks were completely baffled by this imagery. Why is the hero an old man chaining people by the ears?
But the Gauls explained it perfectly. They told the Greeks that true eloquence reaches its absolute peak not in the physical strength of youth, but in the wisdom of old age. The golden chains represent the power of perfectly chosen words.
Language can lead a person anywhere, not by brute force, but by engaging their will so completely that they smile while being led, entirely unaware of the chains.
And this same god, Ogma, is credited with inventing the Ogham script, the early Celtic alphabet that consisted of lines carved into the edges of standing stones. He is a frontline, skull-crushing warrior, and he's a master of the alphabet.
The Celts simply did not see brute force and eloquence as opposites. The sword compels the body, the word compels the mind.
And if we look at Brigid, we see this synthesis executed perfectly. She is arguably one of the most beloved deities. She's the goddess of poetry, the goddess of healing, and the goddess of smithcraft.
Now, to a modern mind, those seem like three entirely random portfolios given to one person. What does writing a poem have to do with banging on an anvil?
I found the anthropological explanation for this absolutely beautiful. They aren't random at all. They're all expressions of the exact same elemental force, the transformative power of fire applied to raw material.
Yes. You take raw, unshaped ore pulled from the mud, apply the blistering heat of the forge, and you transform it into a perfectly balanced sword.
Right.
You take a dying, sick body, apply the fire of botanical and medical knowledge, and you forge health.
And for poetry.
You take raw, chaotic human grief or joy, apply the fire of language and meter, and you forge poetry. Brigid is the forge itself.
She was so conceptually vital to the culture that when Christianity arrived, they simply couldn't erase her. She seamlessly transitioned into St. Bridget. Her sacred perpetual flame at Kildare was kept burning by Christian nuns for centuries. They just rebranded the goddess because the function she served was too foundational to lose.
If Brigid represents the conceptual, spiritual idea of the forge, then the gods Goibniu, Lukta, and Credne represent the ultimate, practical divine assembly line.
The divine smiths.
Yes, these are the three smith gods tasked with keeping the divine army armed during battle.
The coordination between these three is hypnotic. Goibniu, Master Smith, needs exactly 3 strikes of his hammer to forge a flawless, lethal spearhead. Lukta, the right, takes exactly 3 cuts of his axe to shape the wooden shaft perfectly.
And Credne.
Credne, the brazier, simply tosses the metal rivet into the air, and it lands perfectly in the hole, binding the metal to the wood instantly. 3 strikes, 3 cuts, 1 toss, over and over again.
It is a mythological representation of the perfection of divided skilled labor. No human forge could replicate that speed or precision.
And Goibniu's role was dual purpose. He didn't just make weapons to deal death, he also brewed the magical ale of immortality that kept the gods young.
He managed mortality in both directions, giving the army the tools to deal death to their enemies and the drink to keep death away from themselves.
Which brings us to one of the most wild, psychedelic stories in this entire deep dive. The story of Ceridwen and the Cauldron of Ewen, coming from the Welsh branch of Celtic myth.
Ah, the Welsh tradition is fantastic.
Ceridwen is an incredibly powerful enchantress, and she has a son who is universally recognized as the ugliest, most unfortunate boy in the world. She decides that the only way he will ever survive in a cruel world is if he is brilliantly, undeniably wise. So she sets out to brew Ewen. Pure, concentrated, divine inspiration.
It is a massive, agonizing undertaking. She spends an entire year gathering highly specific herbs at highly specific astrological times, boiling them continuously in a massive cauldron.
all to distill the absolute totality of world knowledge into just 3 glowing drops.
Yes.
Because she has to manage the magic, she hires a little insignificant servant boy named Gwienbach just to stir the pot and keep the fire hot. For a whole year, he just stirs.
But on the final day, the cauldron suddenly bubbles over and 3 scalding drops of the A1 splash out and land right on Gwienbach's thumb.
In pure reflex, crying out in pain, he thrusts his burned thumb into his mouth. And the moment he swallows those drops, the universe opens up to him. He accidentally consumes the totality of knowledge meant for her son.
He instantly knows everything, including the fact that Ceridwen is about to kill him for ruining a year of her work.
Ceridwen is absolutely furious, and this epic, shape-shifting chase sequence begins. It's basically an ancient, magical action movie.
It reads like a philosophical argument conducted at a full sprint. Gwienbach realizes he has to flee, so he uses his new magic to turn into a hare, sprinting through the underbrush.
And Ceridwen instantly transforms into a greyhound, snapping at his heels.
He reaches a river and dives in, transforming into a fish. She hits the water right behind him as an otter, hunting him through the rapids.
He bursts out of the water and takes to the sky as a bird. She shifts into a hawk, diving out of the sun to strike him. Finally, exhausted, he sees a pile of harvested wheat on the ground, drops out of the sky, and transforms into a single, microscopic grain of wheat, hiding among millions of others.
A brilliant hiding spot. But Ceridwen transforms into a black hen, lands on the pile, and meticulously pecks through it until she finds him and swallows him whole.
But because he is pure magic now, he doesn't die. 9 months later, she gives birth to him. And when she looks at the infant, he is so radiantly beautiful that she cannot bring herself to kill him. Instead, she puts him in a leather bag and throws him into the sea, leaving him to fate.
And he is eventually rescued in a salmon weir and grows up to become Taliesin, the greatest, most enlightened bard in all of Welsh history.
When I read this, it struck me as such a profound analogy for how human beings actually acquire wisdom.
How do you mean?
Well, you don't get true, deep wisdom by attending a seminar or just quietly reading a book. You get it by surviving the brutal pressure cooker of experience.
Right.
The knowledge didn't just quietly educate Gwienbach, it actively pursued him. It forced him to run, to adapt, to transform over and over again just to survive it. Wisdom was the crucible.
That is a phenomenal reading of the text. Wisdom in this tradition isn't a static possession you acquire and put on a shelf. It is an active state of being that you must endure.
But having explored all these intensely human domains, kingship, warfare, craft, wisdom, we need to step over the threshold. We need to look at the spaces where human rules completely stop applying. The spaces between. Let's start with the sea.
For the ancient Celts, the sea and the otherworld were functionally the same thing. The ocean was the great shifting boundary of reality.
And the undisputed lord of that space is Manannán mac Lir. The texts describe him riding a chariot over the rolling waves as easily as a king rides over a paved road.
Yes, the relativity of the sea.
There is a beautiful text called The Voyage of Bran, where a mortal sailor is out on the ocean, lost, and he encounters Manannán. The god is singing to him from his chariot. But I have to admit I was genuinely confused by the mechanics of what happens next. The god reveals a completely different reality to the sailor.
How did the Celts actually understand this? How can 2 realities exist in the same water?
It is one of their most profound philosophical concepts, subjective reality.
When the mortal sailor, Bran, looks down over the edge of his boat, he sees exactly what he is constituted to see. A cold, gray, terrifying, wave-tossed ocean with a few salmon swimming in the depths.
Which is what it is to him.
Right. But when Manannán looks down at the exact same physical space, he perceives a sun-dappled, warm plain of blooming flowers, and the salmon are actually joyful calves playing in a meadow.
So it's not an optical illusion. The world you perceive is entirely a function of how you are constituted to perceive it.
Precisely. The reality isn't changing, the observer is. 2 completely distinct, valid realities exist in the exact same physical coordinates, entirely dependent on who is looking.
Manannán is the keeper of that knowledge. He guards the gates between those persexual realities.
And as we consider these vast natural forces like the sea, we also have to look at how these deeply localized Celtic gods survived the relentless machine of the Roman Empire.
Because Rome conquered Gaul and Britain, and their standard operating procedure was to assimilate the local gods into their own pantheon to pacify the locals.
The Roman assimilation. But some Celtic gods were just too powerful to be watered down, like Epona.
She is this incredibly powerful horse goddess. And I learned that in Celtic culture, the horse wasn't just a vehicle. It was the ultimate symbol of sovereignty and aristocratic power.
Yes.
Epona is usually depicted riding side saddle, which I initially thought was just a modesty thing, but it's not, is it?
No, riding side saddle in this context isn't about utility or modesty. It is a regal, authoritative pose. She is not a soldier riding into battle. She is the land itself carrying the queen. She represents pure sovereignty.
And the Roman cavalry, many of whom were recruited from conquered Celtic tribes, revered her so deeply that the Roman military hierarchy had no choice but to literally put her on their official religious calendar.
The mighty Roman conquerors ended up officially worshiping the god of the people they conquered.
That is an incredible cultural victory. Then you have gods like Tyrannus, the thunder god, represented by thousands of small wheel amulets found all across Europe.
The thunder wheel.
Right. The wheel represented the rolling thunder across the sky, the relentless turning of the year. And Valenus, the god of the healing, purifying light, directly connected to the massive Beltane fires lit every spring to cleanse the cattle.
These gods represent the ways the Celts used specific symbols to negotiate with nature's extremes, the destructive chaos of the storm and the life-giving necessity of the sun.
But amid all these loud, clearly defined forces, there is one figure that stands in total contrast: Cernunnos, the Lord of the Wild.
Yes, Cernunnos. He is absolutely everywhere in the archaeological record. The most famous depiction is on the Gundestrup cauldron, this massive silver ball found in Denmark.
He is shown sitting cross-legged, almost in a yogic pose, wearing massive stag antlers.
In one hand, he holds a torque, which is a symbol of civilization, wealth, and human obligation. But in his other hand, he grips a ram-headed serpent, which is a creature purely of the Philonic underworld.
He is surrounded by wolves and deer. But here is what drives me crazy. We have his image everywhere, but we have absolutely zero surviving myths about him.
None.
No stories, no epic poems, no dialogue. I have to ask, did we just lose his stories, or is the silence actually the point?
Anthropologists and mythologists debate this, but I strongly argue that the silence is the point. Cernunnos represents the deep, impenetrable wilderness.
The Silent Lord.
He is the space entirely outside the palisade walls of human civilization. He is the wild given just enough of an anthropomorphic face so that humanity can conceptualize him, and the wild inherently resists narrative.
That makes perfect sense. A forest doesn't have a plot. It doesn't have a three-act structure or a moral arc. It just exists.
Exactly. He sits in total stillness at the dangerous intersection of civilization and the primal underworld, balancing the torque and the serpent. He doesn't need to speak, and he doesn't need to explain himself to us. The silence is his nature.
That is incredibly haunting. From the silent, impenetrable wild, let's move into the Welsh otherworld, known as Anne.
Ah, Aran and Rhiannon.
Yes, this space introduces us to Erawan, the king of the dead. And I love this because he is not some terrifying skeletal grim reaper. The story starts when a mortal lord named Wheel is out hunting, and his hounds accidentally run off Erawan's magical, red-eared white hounds from a kill.
It's a massive insult.
But Erawan rides up, and he is actually very polite, very courteous about the breach in etiquette. However, he demands a very strange restitution. He and Pwyll have to magically trade places and faces for a year and a day.
It is a remarkable narrative setup. Pwyll goes down into the otherworld, wearing Erawan's exact face, ruling his kingdom, and even sleeping in the same bed as Erawan's wife. Though the text takes great care to note that Pwyll respectfully turns his face to the wall every single night and doesn't touch her.
A true gentleman of the otherworld.
Indeed. He successfully defeats Erawan's great rival in single combat, and he rules the realm with perfect justice. When the year is up and they swap back to their own bodies, they realize how honorably the other behaved, and they become best friends, constantly sending exotic gifts across the threshold of death.
It radically reframes the concept of the afterlife. The otherworld isn't a punishing hell or a cloudy heaven. It is just a different, neighboring kingdom, complete with its own complex politics, hunting trips, and feasts.
It's just the next county over, you just can't see the border.
And that brings us to Rhiannon, another figure closely tied to the otherworld. Her introduction is stunning. She rides out into the mortal world on a gleaming white horse. She is moving at a very slow, steady, relaxed walk.
Yes.
The mortal king sees her and sends his best rider to catch her. But no matter how fast the mortal horse sprints, it cannot close the distance. After days of exhausting his best horses trying to catch a woman who was just walking, the king finally rides out himself, utterly exhausted, and just yells out, begging her to stop.
And she stops immediately.
And her response is brilliant. She essentially says, I would have gladly stopped much sooner. If you had only asked, it would have been far better for your horse.
It's such a flex.
It really is. But she chooses to stay in the mortal world and marry the king. However, she pays a terrible, agonizing price for crossing that boundary. Years later, after she gives birth to a son, the child is mysteriously kidnapped in the night. The maidservants, terrified that they will be executed for falling asleep on watch, smear puppy blood on Rhiannon's face while she sleeps and scatter bones around her bed.
They frame her for devouring her own newborn child.
And the penance the king forces upon her is deeply psychologically degrading. She is not executed. She is forced to sit by the horse block at the gates of the city every day for years.
And whenever a visitor arrives, she must confess to her supposed crime and then offer to carry the visitor into the city on her back, like a beast of burden.
The woman who rode the uncatchable magical horse from the other world is forced to literally be a horse for mortals. The humiliation is staggering.
But she endures it.
She endures it with this unbelievable pointed patience until her son is eventually discovered alive and returned to her. She never breaks. She just waits for the truth to inevitably surface. We are told her magical birds can sing the living into a death-like sleep. She has immense power, yet she chooses to suffer this human humiliation rather than destroy the kingdom.
So if we look at the entire tapestry we've unrolled today, kings with silver arms, gods eating pits of porridge, goddesses extracting courage, and magical chases across the countryside, what does this all mean?
Right. So what does this all mean? We've explored these incredibly detailed, complex, gritty figures. But if you look closely at the framework, there is a glaring, massive absence at the very center of the mythology.
The Tuatha De Danann.
Exactly. The gods are called the Tuatha De Danann. That literally translates to the tribe of the goddess Danu.
The missing mother.
We have this entire exhaustive deep dive on her children, her tribe, her descendants. But where is Danu? I combed through the sources, and she has no dialogue. She fights no battle. She has no epic narrative. She is literally just a name holding up the entire pantheon.
She is arguably the most significant gap in the entire Celtic historical record. Anthropologists can only speculate. Perhaps the Christian scribes looking for entertaining heroic sagas just didn't find her dramatic enough to preserve. Or perhaps her essence was too vast, too deeply cosmological to fit into a neat, linear narrative. She is the mother of them all, the absolute foundation of the worldview, but she's completely absent from the page.
It serves as a stark reminder that what we've been discussing today is merely a fragmented mirror.
Yes. The Celtic gods are a testament to a worldview where the sacred is messy, grounded, and demands a heavy price, but we are only seeing the shards that manage to survive the translation of time.
Which brings me to a final thought I want to leave everyone with. I want you to think about our modern digital landscape today. Imagine if, through some catastrophe, it was suddenly and completely wiped out. Centuries from now, future historians are trying to reconstruct what we valued as a society, but they only have fragmented, out-of-context screenshots, a handful of memes, and corrupted text files.
A very limited window.
Right. What crucial mother figures, what fundamental, absolute context of our daily lives would be completely lost to them? What is the Danu of our era, the concept or the foundation that goes completely unrecorded simply because it is so obvious to us, so deeply ingrained in our reality that we don't even bother writing it down?
That is a profound question to end on. As we established at the very beginning, distance to the divine or to the truth is only measured by attention. The question is, what foundational truths are we failing to pay attention to?
Exactly. The gods, the truths, they aren't hiding on a marble mountain somewhere in the clouds. They're in the hills right outside your window. You just have to know how to look.